Good afternoon. Good morning, colleagues. Thank you so much for joining. I'm Sofia Espinosa. I'm a land and water tenure expert, and I'm the coordinator of the Scalewood project in Thailand. I'm very pleased to welcome you to the today's session on Mapping the Blue Commons, Technology, Tenure, and Governance in Coastal and Water Tenure Systems, but by Abid Hirat, GAs and project specialist, and Leah Kellenberger, project manager at the Cadasta Foundation. As you know, this is the second Water Tenure Mondays series, and this builds on the success and the participation of many of you during the first session organized between 2021 and 2022, which engaged more than 1,008 participants from all over the world. This new series focuses on Asia and the Pacific and is part of the roadmap towards the dialogue on water tenure for the region. As many of you know, since 2021, FAO has supported water tenure assessments, and since 2023, these efforts are part of a larger initiative aiming to support the COAC mandate on the recommendation to launch a global dialogue on water tenure in order to develop principles for responsible governance of tenure. During this session and over the coming weeks, we will share some case studies, tools, and experiences on how countries see water tenure and how other partners can adapt this approach to strengthen the understanding of rights allocation, highlighting water tenure and its role in sustainable and equitable water governance. In this series, we will explore questions as how water tenure could be understood, how does the link with water governance and other natural resources, for example, with land, forest, and fisheries, and how can Asia and the Pacific experience can contribute to the global dialogue on water tenure. Our goal is to foster dialogue, share lessons, and build a common understanding across the region, paving the way to the upcoming regional dialogue in Bangkok in May 2026. So thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to this lively and interactive session. With this in mind, I want to introduce Abid Hirat, GIS and project specialist, and Leah Kellenberg, project manager, both at the Cadasta Foundation. Abid Hirat is a GIS specialist with over 7 years of experience in urban planning, data management, and geospatial analysis within the development and social sectors. Leah Kellenberg is a project manager at the Cadasta Foundation, overseeing the implementation of programs and partnerships in South and Southeast Asia, focusing on land and resource governance, community tenure formalization, and strengthening land administration institutions. Please welcome, and I give the floor to Abid and Leah for the presentation. Thank you so much. The floor is yours, Abid.
Thank you, Sophia, so much for that introduction. Thank you to all of our colleagues at FAO for giving us this time today, and thanks to everyone else from joining in all over the world. As Sophia said, my name is Leah, and we will go ahead and start with our presentation. All right, we can go to the next slide. So I'll just give a little introduction and set the scene a little bit about what Cadasta does. Cadasta is a US-based nonprofit with staff based globally in our active regions. We work to advance land and resource rights around the world. We have experience in about 50 countries, working from the local to national level, using geospatial technology to create more effective and sustainable management of our Earth's resources. Next slide. We work mainly through deploying GIS technology. We offer technical assistance, advisory services, complemented by hands-on training to build capacity at the local context that we're working in. Cadasta was originally founded on the concept of applying geospatial technology to advance on the continuum of land rights for individuals or communities. So we start from the bottom up. We believe that starting with documenting the use and occupation of a person or a community at a specific place at a specific time can help support tenure security. A lot of times we work in environments where we support fit for purpose documentation, and then that is used as government accepted evidence for formal tenure documentation. So we see the progression from starting with putting a point on a map at a place and time to that formal land tenure security document. But since the concept was to deploy technology in these various scenarios at various points in the continuum of rights, we work in environments where the legal framework is not always in place to have evidence of ownership and protection of resources. And we work where documentation can help support fill that gap. We've worked in land, and we've worked more recently focusing a lot on forest tenure for indigenous communities. We work with pastoralists in India, and we've worked in coastal areas in Bangladesh, applying the same sort of approach. So what we'll see here today is applying that principle of fit for purpose data collection and technical solutions to advance the understanding of use and occupation of a space. Next slide. So when we refer to commons, we refer to land governed under the customary rights of use by others for activities like grazing animals, gathering wood, fishing. It's not always open public land, but it's areas where shared usage rights in practice. And the blue commons is a concept more recently popularized by the economist Guy Standing in his book on the subject. Blue commons just takes the shared ownership concept and applies it to our blue areas, our coastal areas, lagoons, rivers, water systems. It calls for collective stewardship against devastation of these resources. So that's what we're going to be looking at today, our marine and coastal environments. Next slide. So coastal and marine resources are under a tremendous amount of pressure from a variety of competing interests and climate pressures. Millions of people depend on our water resources, but they are areas that are physically and otherwise in flux. Boundaries of coastlines shift from rising seas, sinking islands, tidal ebbs, storm surges. Mangrove ecosystems are evolving and degrading. Communities are growing or migrating. These areas in particular face a lot of tourism and development pressures. They're areas that are often the most affected by natural disasters, worsened by climate change. They get degraded further after each storm season. As many of colleagues on previous webinars have noted, the interests and rights of people in these areas often overlap and conflict. Next slide. So as I mentioned previously, Cadasta's starting point is deploying GIS technology and collecting data at the ground level. So that is how we approach these issues. So how can we capture all of these competing interests and pressures put on our water commons and coastal ecosystems? What technologies and methodologies can advance safer, healthier, more inclusive, and responsive blue ecosystems and economies? And Cadasta's answer to that question is dynamic, time-aware geospatial models that can visually display various data sets at once, data portals that include all relevant stakeholders to advance governance, risk planning, and resource allocation, models that can strengthen community participation in planning and decision-making, and subsequently policies informed by this data that can integrate land, water, and forest systems and take a landscape-based approach. We believe that technology can bridge the gap between communities and governing institutions. Data can show the reality to drive informed and data-driven decisions at the community, corporate, and policymaker level. Next slide. So, based on all of this information, what that looks like in practice is the Cadasta Blue Commons solution, where we bring together data collection, visualization, and analysis tools tailored to the coastal context. My colleague Abid will show us our configurable collection of toolkits that can be used at the community or local authority level that aims to improve governance, planning, monitoring, disaster risk management, and preparedness. We believe that all of these pieces can work together to give a full picture of the different challenges faced in the coastal environment, as we believe the tenure and stewardship of these ecosystems needs a holistic approach. I will just note before we go into looking at this that it's a closed tool. We'll share the link, but not every page we look at is going to be publicly available. This kind of technology, this tool is accessible through a formal agreement with us. We adhere to really strict data privacy protocols with our partners. So this is not going to be real partner data that we show today. This is not even viewable within our GIS ecosystem to other partners that work with us. This is the data that we see is for this demo, and only data collected on the platform is viewable and used based on the scope of work dictated by what we're doing in a project. So with that introduction, I will pass it over to Abid to show us what this can do.
Thanks, Leah. Hi, everyone. I'm Abid, and I'll be walking you through how we are using ArcGIS suite to support coastal governance and conservation. Let me start with what we mean by Coastal Blue Common Solution. This is essentially a GIS toolkit stack that supports full cycle from data capture, secure storage, analysis, and decision. ArcGIS suite, we use this ecosystem from maps, satellite imageries, web apps, because it provides reliable backbone to the workflow. Participatory data collection, community knowledge becomes structured spatial data. Secure data storage, data is stored with a proper access and control. Information isn't scattered across random Excel sheets and devices. Data ownership and control. Governance matters. Who can view, edit, and download the data can be defined very clearly. Dashboard and visualization. We convert this field inputs into live dashboard for decisions, not just maps, but trends and summaries. Integration and migration. And finally, the platform supports bringing in outside layers, could be from government boundaries or coastal regulation zones. Now, let me take you into the demo hub site. I will show you how it looks it end to end. So I'll share my screen. Okay. I hope the screen is visible. So this is the hub site. Homepage is mainly a landing point. You can access via URL, which we'll provide in the chat. The Blue Common Hub is a collection of toolkits and methodologies for understanding and managing Blue Commons. Examples in it are for the Gujarat coast. You will see 4 pages: participatory mapping, coastal change monitoring, mapping marine ecosystems, and mangrove mapping. Also, this hub is language friendly. Depending on the users, we can toggle language so that it is usable for the local organization and the communities. To quickly showcase, if I switch to another language, you can see that it automatically translates into that so that it's usable for the local community. Let me go back to English. I want to begin with the participatory mapping because this is a foundation layer for the entire hub. This toolkit is designed to help coastal communities and local organizations to document what they already know best. Things like routes, activity zones, major hotspots, turn that knowledge into usable evidence. And this matters for a various important reasons. First, it brings local knowledge into a format that can be used as a spatial data. Second, it helps build evidence for better decisions, whether that's around conservation or tenure. Third, it creates transparency because everyone is looking at the same data on the maps or the trends. And finally, it allows for a faster response during difficult or conflict situation. What makes this toolkit really important is that we can collect not information, not just text, but it also captures geometry, points, such as points, lines, and polygons, along with the photos and documents as evidence. So we are mapping realities, not just describing it. To do this, we use Survey 123. Survey 123 allows us to collect data in a structured fashion from mobile-based forms. It works offline, which is crucial in a coastal and remote areas where connectivity can be unreliable. It runs on a basic smartphone and supports multiple languages, making it accessible for communities to use themselves. So now let me show you what that becomes in a real time. This is a dashboard where it becomes powerful. This is a participatory mapping dashboard. It turns field inputs into decision-ready outputs. On the map, we are typically combining three kinds of layers. As you can see here, there's a layer on the hotspots where you can map sacred groves, let's say bird areas and other options. You can also map coastal routes and navigation corridors. In the zones, you can map tenure and ecosystem areas such as customary fishing zones. You can map evidence and encroachment areas, mangrove areas, and as such. You'll notice that we can also overlay governance layers like coastal regulation zones and hazard line. So now it becomes easy and quick, where community information overlaps with the formal regulation. On the right side, instead of just map, you can also check the quick summaries of the total zone area, number of sites, different zone uses, and zone status. Let me go to the data collection side. This section has three survey forms on the survey 123 which we have created. First one is the coastal routes and navigation corridor. This survey captures coastal routes as geo traces or line geometries. Fisheries can draw the exact path they travel, including access corridors and navigation routes. Zones and tenure ecosystem. The second one. This form captures polygon or geoshapes representing customary fishing grounds, mangrove areas, ecologically sensitive zones. And the third one is the hotspot. I'll open the hotspot to showcase. This form captures geo point for the hotspots like pollution, sacred grove, or bird area, etc. So let me just quickly take you through this form. So in the second page, you see is a general information. One is a respondent information that you can feed into, like who is responding to this. So let's say me, I'm responding. You can change what is my role during the response and what is the date of mapping. In the land side, you can choose which village I'm mapping about and which beach or coastal region I'm talking about. So if I go next, I can also choose what kind of a hotspot I'm trying to map here. So for example, if I'm mapping, let's say pollution hotspot, I can, on the map, then I can choose the point and it captures its latitude and longitude. Then I can also write the main name of the location. So it's again a text field. And I can also choose what is the condition and risk level as of now. So for the pollution, the risk level is very severe. I can also capture other attributes like what is the reason for this issues. It could be different. It could be garbage and waste. So based on the options, I can select. If there is another option, I can go to other and add another text here. Similar way, I can also have different attributes that I want to capture. And at the end, I can also capture photographs for the hotspot or a site. I can directly take a photograph from my mobile phone. So this works on the mobile phone and also works in a different language. If I'm done with this page, I can move to the next page. If I want to add any additional notes or local warning, I can add those content here and I can click submit. So once this is submitted, it gets updated live on the dashboard. Okay. So now let me shift to a second toolkit, which is a coastal change monitoring. First, this slider is the simplest way to understand coastal line change. You can simply drag and compare the imagery across the time. So the erosion and acceleration becomes visible without needing a technical know-how. It is useful for quick communication with communities and decision makers. Why this matters? Tracking and documenting coastal change helps communities, relevant organizations, and coastal authorities to understand what is being lost, what is at risk, and where the action is needed. By turning shoreline shift into clear evidence, it supports good planning, protection, and timely response before the damage becomes irreversible. Now, here is the dashboard view. This analysis is based on the Digital Earth Africa Coastline dataset. The shoreline extraction algorithm was developed by Geoscience Australia. It has 3 tabs. The first one is overview, which explains the workflow step and how it is automated. In a simple steps, the method is you take a satellite imagery over the years, detect the land and water boundary consistently, correct those lines with the high and low tide and noisy condition. You generate a shoreline year by year, so the movement is measurable. Behind the scene, it is automated, though the process is technical, but the results are easy to understand and plan for. I can also measure the change over the years. In this case, we can see there's 183 meters of the change. Okay, now I'll be moving to the marine ecosystem toolkit. This shows how different layers can be combined for the analysis. On the first tab here, the idea is to bring multiple zone layers into view from both land and water. You typically see layers like shipping routes, marine zones like fishing ground, fishing areas, tourism areas, and sacred. And in the coastal land use, you can see, the areas for the coastal conservation, the development area, and the farmlands. Now on the second tab, what you see is a marine life. You'll notice the 2 main types of information that is captured. A grid surface of the fishing intensity and fishing hours, showing where the activity is concentrated. That was species as point. Here it is shown as a different species plus the protected seascape. This is a demo with a dummy data. It just shows how analysis works. In a high intensity fishing area with sensitive zones, protected areas, that flags for the government's discussion. In species conservation cluster, in a certain areas, you can identify ecological hotspots and plan seasonal protection and community-led conservation. On the right side, you can see charts for the users to quickly count and the composition, not just map. Finally, let's go to mangroves. Mangroves aren't just green cover; they are a living coastal infrastructure. They protect shorelines and support fisheries. They are also major blue carbon ecosystem. This slider shows a classification style view, so you can compare imagery with classes mapped visually in simple steps. What it means to do image classification is we choose a good satellite imagery, which is cloud-free and comparable with seasons and different tides. You use color band behaviors as mangroves and ocean reflect different light spectrum differently. You run a supervised classification model, and where you classification model like a random forest, where you take a sample data from the oceans and mangroves to train the tool, validate with the sample points, and let the classification tool generate mangrove and extend layers. Compare this across the time to detect the loss and gain and prioritize restoration areas. So that is the full tool of the toolkits that we have been used in different projects. From starting with the participatory mapping to convert local knowledge into data, coastal change monitoring to see how shoreline movements over the time, marine coastal ecosystem layers to overlay for the analysis, and mangrove for the classification based monitoring. So that's all from my side, and thank you. I'll hand it over. Bye.
Thank you so much, Abid. Thank you so much, Leah, for introducing us to this new tool and seeing how also Cadastra is thinking to go for the land mapping to also water and water resources. I see some of the colleagues have already posted some questions in the Q&A that we have moved to the in the chat box that we have moved to the Q&A. And I see Felix Martin from FAO. Felix, do you want to answer to maybe ask your question directly?
Oh, that's fine. No, thank you for the presentation. Very interesting. Spatial management in fisheries is not a new thing. You can look at, there's a lot of publications already done jointly, FAO, World Bank, and etc. So it's great to see what you're doing. My question is more about, as we are here in the water tenure group, it's my impression that the inland waters are more of an issue with water tenure than the marine, because in marine there's only a few stakeholders, like there's the fishers, but there's tourism, and that's it. But in inland waters, like along rivers, floodplains, lakes, etc., there's many more stakeholders and many more interests. So I would like to see the tool that you have developed, whether or not wouldn't not be possible to also deal with inland waters. So, and also I note you talk about aquaculture. Please consider aquaculture and fisheries as two really separate things. Aquaculture is basically agriculture in water, and fisheries is basically hunting in water. But my main question is, why limit your Blue Commons concept to the marine environment and not deal with freshwater? Thank you.
Yes, thanks for the question. So Blue Common is not meant only about the sea. It is about the shared water systems and water tenure. We talked about the coastal and marine areas right now because that's where our current pilots and project that we had tested, but it can always work in the different views. And you're absolutely right about aquaculture and capture fishery. They are not the same, and it deals with the different ways how the resources are managed. But same tools can be also implemented in this different blues, as Lee had mentioned. It is not just focused on the coastal areas, definitely. The whole toolkits are also configurable for the different scope of the project, right? So yeah, it's just a starting point, not the end.
Thank you. So does this mean that in the future we can be looking also at some other water tenure arrangements that are not in coastal areas? Is this correct?
Yes. To also give you an example, one of our project in Bangladesh with a local partner was not just about mapping the blues, but it was about mapping the coastal, the river fishery people, how the livelihood is moving in this region, right? So what is been the zone of the fishing, what is the zone of the aquaculture? So we're also trying to map that in that case. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
If I may, Sophia, just to interact, basically what I hope, just a comment to you, Abid, you should also realize that fisheries is not a livelihood. Most of the time, fishers are also agriculturists, pastoralists. It's a mixed livelihood, which makes things very complicated. It's not that people have one livelihood that they lean on, that they want to get their support from, but it's mixed. So it is a very complicated thing, and I'm very interested to see how you're going to deal with that complexity. Thank you.
We're all very curious to see how you're going to build this in your mapping exercises, and also to learn from that. I see a next question from Selina Ibrahim. Selina, do you want to ask directly the question? Thank you for joining, Selina.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I was interested to know, but you mentioned that you're applying this tool in some project. I wondered if there's any publication that you have come out with explaining the tool and how effective or some of the challenges you face in applying it at the project level.
Thanks so much for your question. No, we don't have any publications on this tool specifically. We piloted different pieces of it, but using it all together, we're still working on having some fully fleshed out feedback and adapting from there. So we don't have anything on this tool specifically, but we have some other publications, and Abid and I just recently put out a working paper on the use of GIS and automation at the India Land and Development Conference, which sort of gives you an idea of how these tools and GIS automation for tenure and working at the community level can work. So we would be happy to share that.
Yes, I'm particularly interested in how the participatory approach is working and what type of skills or things, that participants would have. And there's an element of co-production in developing the programs in order to ensure sustainability. Those would be something I would be very interested to learn about in your project. I have a couple of other questions I've put in, but maybe I'll give somebody else a chance before I come back in. Thanks.
Thank you, Celine. Yes, let's do for new hands first. But yeah, Leah, a bit you want to reply to the validation and elaboration of the tools and maybe validation of the data?
Yeah, I'll pass that to Abid, but I'll begin by saying that all of our interventions are very locally configured. We always work with local communities or authorities to configure those collection forms and maps and everything like that so that we're capturing what people are actually needing and seeing on the ground and never imposing what we think up of in an office somewhere, So Abid, maybe you can talk more about our co-creation process.
So, yeah, definitely. What we treat validation as a social process, not just a technical one. In a simple terms, what we do is we validate it with the public and the community. So the data that has been collected during the participatory mapping and collected from the secondary and third different sources, and it comes together, it has been then validated with the community. And what we try to create is create a one source of truth. So it helps in the decision making and taking the data to the next stage, if I'm able to answer.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I see, Barbara, you have a really also interesting question about variability. Do you want to ask directly our colleagues here?
Maybe, hi, well, very interesting as the reactions show. We did also mapping with communities just on the ground, and then it is complex. Multiple sources for multiple uses, multi-purpose infrastructure, single-purpose infrastructure. But communities really bottom up, they know. But even in communities, of course, the perspective of the authority would be different from the perspective of one of the poorer households. The ones that do livestock have a different perspective than the others, etc. My sense is that public, and I hear you with partners, etc. So I'm not, but for the future, transparency to make it public would be a way to validate. And maybe Julie, you mentioned that you already use it in a practical manner. Maybe you can tell us, share how you get this validation and really an inclusive perspective. Or if it is biased, then at least it's clear how it is biased. Thanks.
To try to answer that, attempt to answer that question, definitely transparency is important. But many times the community data is also very sensitive to that particular community itself, right? So the transparency within the community is something that we try to do that, so by overlapping different attributes and zones, we try to, identify the conflict regions within the community. But taking this data, which is a very community sensitive, and putting out in the open might not be a viable solution, right? Because some of this information, but then there is also adding another layer, the top layer about the community sensitive zone, and that becomes more an operations data is a different question again. And also the validation is done. The group of the community is not individually validated, because this what we do is we're creating these dashboards and this data collection toolkits, which is also open to this community to access the data from the community itself. As a group, they can also validate the data which is coming to them, and the maps then are eventually finalized. Leah, if you want to add anything to it.
No, I think that captures it perfectly. I think, especially the last couple of years, my project portfolio specifically focuses a lot on Indigenous peoples and local communities. And we take free, prior, and informed consent really seriously and adhere to strict protocols with data privacy, as that is a really big priority for a lot of our partners on the ground. So we do not share any of this information publicly. That doesn't mean it can't be shared publicly. Like the tool itself, if a community would so choose, they can publish their information publicly and share it. And we have a number of partners that use maps, web maps, story maps, and share their information publicly as they wish. But especially personally identifiable information, we would never want that to get in the wrong hands.
Thank you, Leah. Also brings a lot of other questions regarding, of course, privacy and how, as our community, we take into consideration also how do we share the information. I see, Barbara, you also had a really interesting question, and I'm gonna see it online. How do you include variability in your maps? Do you have one for dry season, for example, and one for wet monsoon season maps, or how do you use different layers? How do you cope with this?
So rather than one map, what we can do is, like, we can have a separate layers for the different seasons, for the dry seasons and the wet seasons and monsoon seasons, because we need to make sure we are capturing those seasonal differences. And so when we are comparing over the different time of the years, it is not viable to capture different season data with a different season data. So that is definitely is considered to have a separate seasonal data. And yeah.
Thank you so much. I see some other questions already in the Q&A, but I'm gonna give the floor to Arihit. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it correct. Arihit Hosh. Gosh, do you want to ask your question directly? Otherwise, the question is, given that Asia Pacific region produces 90% of the world's rice, while facing severe water stress, rapidly depleting groundwater, and increasing the water climate extremes, including floods and droughts, how can countries transition to water-efficient agriculture systems without compromising food security of people that depends on rice? To make it simple, a really huge question. I don't know if you have any comments on that. From your perspective, how can your tool help governments to be better prepared with technologies to deal with climate resilient crop varieties and water management practices?
Definitely, I don't have the direct answer, but to answer how the tools can be utilized. So any mapping tools which allows us to understand the water scarcity and allows us to understand how the water lines and how they are flowing, it will definitely allow us to make a better decisions in how to navigate these water lines which exist in inland, right? So from it could be like identifying location for the bunds, identifying location for the which requires high intensity of water extraction, which requires which area is a less intensity water extraction. So you can use all these mapping tools definitely to come at a better conclusion and decision. But yeah, it's a big question that that requires a lot of attention.
It's a really big question. And just to add from some of our experience, and Abid is actually physically a lot closer to this work than I am. But for example, a lot of the work that we do in India has to do with forest tenure rights for individuals and communities. And we've introduced a more simplistic toolkit to a lot of the communities that we work with in Gujarat many years ago. And because of the capacity building and training aspect of our work and having it based at the community level and having community ownership of the process and data, they have advanced from just mapping their points and their land and trying to get tenure documentation to continuing to use that technology for watershed mapping, resource mapping, based on the income and investment that they've been able to make in their land since receiving tenure documentation. They've advanced into managing water and land resources to better improve crop outputs, management of resources, and things like this. So it's one piece of the puzzle, community ownership and deployment of the right sort of tools and technologies to properly manage resources. And then, I think of course, there's a big legal framework and government authorities that have to step in as well to make sure that on their side, there's proper frameworks and due diligence in place for management of these big resources, especially when you have a big population like in India.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you a bit. I see a new hand. I see from Benjamin. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Benjamin Kirsch, FAO. Impressive tool. I think it's always extremely useful if you map and can make visible, let's say, these changes to adapt to change and to make change happen. I'm wondering about the costs of the application of this technology. You said it's a closed system. It's working on the ArcGIS platform. Any orientation? How much does this cost per hectare, for example?
Ooh, a per hectare cost. I'm not sure if I can come up with that off of the top of my head because that totally depends on sort of the level of accuracy that we are going for in a specific place and time, and the overall coverage and how we can scale it. But we are a nonprofit based out of the US. So we are like a nonprofit partner with Esri. And so we have a special arrangement where we can work with partners and build capacity on the ground and deploy this technology at a much more cost-efficient way than if they would get Esri licenses themselves. And then, we manage our whole ecosystem with it. So what Cadasta does is we work with donors and with clients to help fund that work and subsidize the partner aspect of it on the ground.
Thank you. If you have any information or that we can also look at for future implementation, it will be really interesting to go more in details if you can share any information. And we will also pass it along to the participants. Selena, I see you still have a lot of questions, so I'm going to give the floor for you for one last question. And I know the presenters will be happy to reply to any pending question that we didn't have the time today. We will take the questions and Leah and Abid will address them and we will send you writing feedback by email later. So please, Selena.
Yeah, yes, thanks. I saw that Arajit Ghosh also had his hand up, his or her hand up just now.
Yes. Arijit, you
Was it before me? Yeah, I think it was before me.
Arijit also had a question in the chat it was the question regarding rice production and climate. Arijit, is this a new hand or do you want to ask your question to the participants? I think Selena, you can go.
Okay. Okay, thanks. I mean, sort of related to what was asked just now about the cost that Benjamin asked. And so, so at the end of the project, after the end of the project completion, I mean, the data has already gone up into the ArcGIS. So does the community would still have access, or how do they, continue? Because I assume there will be a project end. Yeah, thanks.
So it depends on how the project has been designed. But for example, if there's a data that has been collected during that project cycle, and if we have a continued partnership, we'll keep our data, and we do make sure the data is still active and live on the platform for a certain period of the time, so that the communities and the project they can share the outcomes. But eventually, if the partners who are working with plans to move out of the platform, because this works in a GIS system where it is not the data formats are not locked behind the ArcGIS S3 system, they can still access this data on their computers with their local open source softwares as well. Leah, if you want to add.
And I think the sustainability aspect of the data and technology platforms, it really depends on what kind of partnership we're having and whether it's a donor funded project or if it's a project funded, a self-funded client or something like that. But we aim to work with our partners for a long time, over many years, and build that capacity within those organizations. And we have had some really successful partnerships that go over a number of years, and then they want to fully transition into their own as we license in partnership and take the data into their own server and platform. So we consider that to be a really successful life cycle of a partnership with us. And that is the goal, for them to manage the data on their own and take these systems into their own hands.
Thank you. Maybe I have a follow-up question to that, but have you already have the opportunity to integrate your data into national data sets, for example, for municipalities or any kind of registry of property of water rights, and if so, have you had also the chance to use your data for to protect any change of the rights of these communities, for example, in cases with internal or international courts?
Let me. Okay, Leah, go ahead. Sure.
Yeah, so again, it totally depends on the context. Since you mentioned international courts, I'll bring up, in the last couple of years, we've been working with the Julian Cho Society in Belize on indigenous Maya forest rights. So there's no legal framework in place for indigenous people to get documentation over their forest tenure. And in the last couple of years, the Caribbean Court of Justice ruled that Belize government has to recognize these rights, but there's still no legal pathway to that. So we've been supporting these communities, do some documentation work and mapping work as evidence and creating a pathway. And it's been viewed by some members of parliament and some ministers in Belize to help advance the regulations there. We're doing some similar work in Suriname, where it's a very similar situation. And then mainly we are working in countries, in areas where land and forest rights, which is our main pieces of work, are legally recognized for the communities that we work with. And so all of the data that we collect, maybe 90% of the work that we do, is about collecting data that is to a government acceptable level of accuracy and with matching tabular data so that it advances the land and forest rights of the people that we work with. So in the South and Southeast Asia region, we're working in India, Indonesia, and a couple other countries on formal forest rights protection. And then, in Sub-Saharan Africa, actually, we're working with a lot of governments on integrating data directly into their national land information systems. And that would be like in Rwanda, Uganda.
Thank you so much. Really interesting. It gives a lot of forethought. And thank you for sharing the tool. I see we're almost at the end of this webinar. We still have some comments in the chat and some questions that I'm going to share with the presenters. And if there's any question, please note that the contacts of the presenters are in the chat. And to finish, please remember also that the videos and the PowerPoints will be available in the ScaleWatt website. I want to thank again the speakers and the attendees and our colleagues supporting this session. Please note, please register to the upcoming sessions. And if you have and you know any of your partners that will want to participate, we have launched the Champions Water Tenure campaign for Southeast Asia. So any communities, organizations that are working in support to the identification, recognition, or protection of water tenure rights, we will be happy to know their stories and to invite them to participate in the regional dialogue in May 2026. And also please note that it is going to be a capacity development session again for the water tenure methodology. And we will hope to see you all also in the upcoming webinars to explore how water tenure also relates to other natural resources, and also to hear from the Global Water Partnership from Malaysia that is going to be presenting next week. So thank you, colleagues, again, and I hope you have a good rest of the day or afternoon, whatever you are. Thank you so much.